If you're in your 30s and you feel like you're barely treading water financially despite making decent money, you're not alone. Actually, you're part of a massive demographic that's silently drowning in debt while keeping up appearances on social media. My name is Lenny, and I've spent the last several years analyzing exactly why seemingly successful people in their 30s are one emergency away from complete financial collapse. And here's what I've discovered. It's not a lack of income that's the problem. It's a perfect storm of financial decisions made in your 20s that have come home to roost right around your 30th birthday. If you're feeling stuck, stressed about money despite having a decent job, or wondering why your friends who make the same money as you seem to be doing better financially, you need to watch this video. So hit that subscribe button and give this a thumbs up if any of this resonates with you. Because understanding how you got into this trap is the first step to getting out of it. Let me paint you a picture of what a typical 30-year-old's financial life looks like today, because it's probably going to hit uncomfortably close to home. By 30, many people have accumulated a dizzying array of financial obligations that seemed reasonable when they were signed up for individually, but have become absolutely suffocating when combined. They've got student loan debt that's probably somewhere between $30,000 and $150,000, depending on their educational path. They've got a car payment, usually at least one, but probably two if they're in a relationship. They've got credit card debt that they don't really want to think about too much. They've probably got some personal loan debt from that time they needed quick cash for something. They might even have a mortgage if they made the jump to homeownership in their late 20s. They're paying rent or a mortgage, insurance on everything, and trying to keep up with an increasingly expensive cost of living. And somehow, despite making what their younger selves would have considered excellent money, they feel poorer than ever. The crushing reality is that most 30-year-olds are spending more than 90% of their income on debt servicing, housing, insurance, and basic living expenses. There's nothing left over, no cushion for emergencies, no money for investing, no ability to pursue meaningful financial goals. Just the endless treadmill of payments to creditors and service providers who are all getting rich while you're getting systematically poorer. But here's the thing that really bothers me about this situation. Most 30-year-olds didn't wake up one day and decide to destroy their financial future. These weren't irrational people making obviously terrible decisions. These were young people making decisions that seemed reasonable at the time with the information they had. The real culprit is a system that's specifically designed to trap young people in debt cycles that are extremely difficult to escape once they've started. And understanding how this system works is absolutely critical if you want to have any chance of breaking free from it. Let's start with the gateway drug to serious adult debt, and that's student loans. For most people, student loans are the first real debt they encounter in their lives. They're also the debt that's most culturally accepted and least questioned. Nobody bats an eye at someone taking on $100,000 in student debt to get a degree. In fact, it's presented as a necessary investment in your future. It's portrayed as the responsible thing to do, the pathway to a better life. But here's what they don't tell you when you're 18 years old and signing documents you don't fully understand. Student loans are basically a bet on your future earning potential, and like any bet, you can lose. The average student loan debt for the class of 2023 is over $37,000 per borrower. That's just the average. Many people are carrying $100,000, $200,000, or even more in student debt before they've had their first real job. The trap with student loans is multifaceted and incredibly effective. First, they're easy to obtain. You don't need good credit, collateral, or even a job. The federal government will essentially hand you money if you're accepted into a degree program. That ease of access makes young people think debt must be acceptable. Second, student loans come with socially acceptable monthly payment amounts that fit into a young person's first salary. When you've just landed your first job making $40,000 or $50,000 a year, a monthly student loan payment of $400 or $500 seems manageable. What they don't tell you is that you'll be making this payment for 10, 15, 20, or even 30 years depending on the repayment plan you choose. And third, student loans are presented as good debt because they're an investment in yourself. Your earning potential supposedly increases so much that the debt becomes irrelevant. But here's the mathematical reality that nobody talks about. If you're paying $500 a month on student loans for 20 years, you've paid $120,000 total. The actual degree you're paying for probably cost $70,000 or $80,000 total. You've paid nearly 50% more than the actual cost of the degree, due to interest. And if you went to graduate school or law school or medical school, the multiplier becomes even more horrifying. But the real trap isn't just the amount of debt. It's how student loan debt interacts with all the other financial decisions you're making in your 20s. When you've already committed to a large student loan payment, it impacts everything else. Your approval for a car loan gets evaluated based on your debt-to-income ratio. Having $500 a month in student loans already committed means that when you go to finance that car, lenders see you as a riskier borrower. To offset that risk, they either give you a higher interest rate or require a larger down payment, or both. So your car payment becomes more expensive than it would have been without the student loans. This is where the compounding effect really starts to kick in, and that's what makes 30 look so different from 25. In your 20s, these debts seem manageable individually, but by 30, they've started to interact with each other and magnify in ways that become truly overwhelming. The second major debt trap that most 30-year-olds fall into is the mortgage situation, and it's particularly pernicious because it wears the mask of being an investment. You're supposed to want to buy a house. Home ownership is the American dream. It's the responsible adult thing to do. What they don't tell you is that a 30-year-old buying their first home is often in the absolute worst financial position to do so. Most first-time homebuyers are carrying student loan debt, car debt, and credit card debt when they make this purchase. They've got minimal savings because they've been paying off all these other obligations. The housing market has made down payments enormous. In many markets, saving 20% down on a median home would require 5 to 10 years of aggressive saving if you're paying off other debts. So what do people do? They buy with minimal down payments, often 3 to 5%, which triggers mortgage insurance requirements. Suddenly, their mortgage payment isn't just principal and interest and property taxes and homeowners insurance. It also includes mortgage insurance, which is a fee that primarily benefits the lender, not the homeowner. A $300,000 mortgage with mortgage insurance isn't just one payment. It's multiple payments bundled together that create a truly massive monthly obligation. When you combine a mortgage with an existing student loan payment, car payments, and credit card debt, you end up with a situation where housing alone is consuming 40 to 50% of gross income. That's not just tight, that's financially unsustainable. One job loss, one major home repair, one medical emergency, and the entire house of cards collapses. But the mortgage trap has another insidious component that most people don't understand until they're deeply in it. A 30-year mortgage isn't really a 30-year mortgage in the way most people imagine it. Most homeowners who take out a 30-year loan will trade up to a new house within 5 to 7 years. This creates a situation where they're paying mostly interest on their first loan and never building meaningful equity before they move on to the next house. And if they've got other debts, that trade-up often involves rolling negative equity from the previous mortgage into a new mortgage on a more expensive house. This is literally the same trap we saw with car buying, but now it's applied to real estate, the asset class that's supposed to be your wealth builder. Instead of building wealth, most 30-year-olds are building debt. They're trading equity they don't have for mortgages on homes they can't actually afford. Now let's talk about the credit card component, because this is where the trap gets really sinister. Credit cards are presented as a convenience tool, a way to build credit, a way to earn rewards on purchases you're going to make anyway. What they don't tell you is that credit cards are a parasitic financial instrument designed to extract wealth from people through interest charges and fees. The average person in their 30s has somewhere between 2 and 4 credit cards with varying amounts of debt spread across them. That debt got there gradually, usually during a period when the person was focused on something else or dealing with some kind of life disruption. Maybe they were going through a job transition, maybe they had medical expenses, maybe they were just spending slightly more than they made and using the credit card to cover the gap. Whatever the reason, by age 30, the average person has anywhere from $3,000 to $15,000 in credit card debt at interest rates between 12 and 24%. Let's do the math on what that actually means. If you've got $10,000 in credit card debt at 18% interest and you're making minimum payments of $200 a month, it's going to take you nearly 8 years to pay that off. And during that time, you'll pay almost $8,000 in interest alone. You'll have paid $18,000 total to eliminate $10,000 of debt. That's not a financial tool. That's a wealth extraction machine disguised as convenience. The credit card trap is particularly effective because it operates on psychological principles that exploit how human brains work. Credit card companies have spent billions of dollars researching exactly how to make people spend more than they can afford to pay back. They make the payment process invisible. You swipe a card and money doesn't physically leave your hand. There's no visceral connection to the money like there is when you hand over cash. They offer rewards that make you feel like you're winning even while you're losing. Oh, you got 2% cash back on that $3,000 vacation you couldn't afford. That's 1% less terrible than it would have been. They encourage you to pay just the minimum. Look, your minimum payment is only $100. Totally manageable. Never mind that you're never actually paying off the balance. And they exploit the psychological phenomenon where paying off one credit card feels like a victory, even when you're transferring that balance to another card or taking on new debt elsewhere. By 30, most people are caught in the minimum payment trap with multiple cards, never quite getting ahead, but always feeling like they're managing it. The reality is that they're in a financial prison where a significant chunk of their income is being transferred directly to credit card companies every single month. Now let's talk about how all of these debts interact with each other and why 30 feels so much harder than 25. The 30-year-old trap isn't the result of a single bad decision. It's the result of many individually reasonable decisions that have compounded in ways that are genuinely overwhelming. Student loans seemed necessary at 18, car payments seemed affordable at 25, the house seemed like the right next step at 29. Each individual decision made sense in its context, but the combination of all these decisions creates a situation where you're committed to paying out somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 a month just to service debt. That's before food, before utilities, before transportation, beyond the car payment, before any medical expenses or emergencies or anything unexpected. For someone making $50,000 a year, that's $1,000 per week before taxes going straight to debt payments. That's why 30-year-olds feel so much poorer despite making decent money. A huge percentage of their income is already spoken for before they even get paid. The psychological impact of this situation is often more damaging than the financial impact, and that's saying something. When you're 30 and you're realizing that you're trapped in this system, there's a sense of helplessness and hopelessness that can be truly devastating. You feel like you're making good money, you've got a decent job, but somehow you're still living paycheck to paycheck. You're not building any wealth. You're not moving forward. And the worst part is that there's no clear path out. If you stop paying the car payment, you lose the car. If you default on the mortgage, you lose your house. If you stop paying the credit card debt, your credit gets destroyed. So you're trapped. You have to keep running the treadmill even though it's clear that it's not going anywhere. Many 30-year-olds respond to this situation by just accepting it as normal. This is just what being an adult is. They tell themselves, everyone has debt. Everyone lives paycheck to paycheck. This is just the reality of modern life. But that's not true. That's actually a belief system that's been deliberately cultivated by the financial industry because it's extremely profitable. If you believe that debt is normal and unavoidable, you're much less likely to make the difficult changes needed to escape it. You're much more likely to accept being trapped as just the way things are. So how do you actually escape from this trap? Because I know that's what you really want to know. The first and most important step is to understand exactly how much debt you're actually carrying and what you're actually paying for it. Most 30-year-olds have a vague idea of how much they owe, but they don't have a clear picture of the total damage. Write down every single debt obligation. Student loans, credit cards, car payments, medical debt, personal loans, everything. Write down the exact amount owed, the interest rate, and the monthly payment for each one. Add it all up. Look at that number. Really look at it. Understand what it means. Then calculate what percentage of your gross income is going to debt payments every single month. For most 30-year-olds, this is going to be an eye-opening and probably depressing exercise. But you need to do it because you can't fix a problem you don't fully understand or acknowledge. Once you've got a clear picture of where you are, the next step is to make a decision about where you want to be. Do you want to spend the next decade paying off debt that you accumulated in your 20s, or do you want to make some significant changes to break free? Because breaking free is possible, but it requires making choices that might be uncomfortable in the short term, but will be absolutely life-changing in the long term. The most effective approach I've seen people use is what I call the debt avalanche method combined with aggressive expense reduction. You're going to make a list of all your debts ordered by interest rate from highest to lowest. Credit cards are at the top, personal loans are next, then car loans, then student loans, then the mortgage at the bottom. You're going to pay the minimum on everything, but every extra dollar you can find is going to attack the highest interest rate debt first. That means credit cards. Get that high interest rate debt eliminated as fast as humanly possible. This is genuinely painful because it means making significant cuts to your lifestyle. You might need to sell the car and buy something used with cash. You might need to move to a cheaper apartment or get a roommate despite being in your 30s. You might need to take a side hustle to generate extra income specifically for debt payoff. But here's the thing. Every dollar you spend to eliminate credit card debt at 18% interest is a dollar that's going to save you approximately $2 in interest over time. It's one of the best financial investments you can possibly make because you're getting a guaranteed return equal to your interest rate. Once the credit cards are gone, you attack the personal loans the same way. The car payment situation is trickier because you need the car. But if you're in a situation where you're driving something expensive with a large payment, it might be time to make a difficult decision. Sell it. Take the loss if you're underwater. Buy something reliable with cash. A used Honda Civic or Toyota Corolla that costs $5,000 to $8,000. Yes, you'll lose money on the sale. Yes, it feels terrible. But you'll immediately free up $1,000 to $2,000 a month in payments. That money can be redirected to eliminate debt at a faster rate. The temporary pain of losing money on the car trade will be worth it. The mortgage is the most complicated piece because it's the biggest debt and you can't just walk away from it without serious consequences. But there are options. You could work toward paying it off faster by putting any extra money toward principal rather than letting it extend another 20 or 30 years. You could potentially refinance to a shorter term and lower payment if rates improve. Or in extreme situations, you could sell the house and rent until the rest of your debt is paid off. I know that sounds crazy. A 30-year-old suggesting you sell your house to get out of debt. But let's do the math. If you sell the house, pay off the mortgage, and rent for $500 a month while you attack the remaining debt, what does that look like? You've freed up $1,500 to $2,000 a month in housing costs. You've eliminated the single largest debt obligation hanging over your head. You can now focus that freed up money on eliminating the credit cards and other consumer debt in 2 to 3 years instead of 5 to 10. Once that's done, you rebuild your down payment and buy a house from a position of financial strength rather than financial desperation. Yes, you've delayed home ownership by 5 years, but you've also positioned yourself to own a home without being crushed by debt in the process. The critical realization that 30-year-olds need to have is that the best time to break the cycle was 5 years ago when the debts were smaller. The second best time is right now, today, no matter how uncomfortable that's going to be, because waiting another 5 years is only going to make it worse. The debts will compound, the interest will keep growing, the situation will become increasingly hopeless. But it's not actually hopeless. There are paths out of this trap. They just require making decisions that feel contrary to everything you've been taught about being a successful adult. Successful adults buy houses. Successful adults drive nice cars. Successful adults have credit cards for emergencies. But actually, genuinely successful adults make the uncomfortable decisions in their 20s and 30s so that they can actually build wealth later. They drive reliable used vehicles without fancy payments. They rent strategically while they build wealth. They live below their means deliberately so that they can take control of their future. The next time you feel envious of someone's fancy house or their expensive car, remember what you're actually seeing. You're not seeing success. You're seeing someone who's made choices that have committed them to decades of debt payments. You're seeing someone who's trapped on the same financial treadmill that you're trying to escape. Real success is financial freedom. It's the ability to make choices based on what you want rather than what you can afford. It's having money left over at the end of the month instead of having month left over at the end of the money. And that success is absolutely achievable if you're willing to make the changes necessary to claim it. Your 30-year-old self is still young enough to course correct. The decisions you make in the next year will echo through the rest of your life. You can either continue on the path that got you to where you are, or you can make some difficult changes and head toward actual financial freedom. The choice is yours, but understand that every month you delay is costing you thousands of dollars in interest and opportunity cost. The debt trap that most 30-year-olds fall into isn't a mystery. It's the predictable result of making individually reasonable decisions that have compounded into something overwhelming. But it's also escapable if you're willing to face the reality of your situation and make the changes needed to break free. The question isn't whether you can escape. The question is whether you're willing to do what it takes to actually escape. That's the real trap. Not the debt itself, but the mental barriers we construct that convince us the trap is inescapable. It's not. But you have to believe that first, and then you have to act.